Good morning, church. What does it mean to be the Messiah? Jesus says it means suffering and death and eventual resurrection. Peter argues that it could not mean that. What do you think? Let me read the gospel passage to you. It is from Mark chapter 8, verse 27 to 35. Mark and his disciples set out for the villages of Caesarea Philippi. Along the way he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" They said in reply, "John the Baptist, others Elijah, still others one of the prophets." And he asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter said to him in reply, "You are the Christ." Then he warned them not to tell anyone about him. He began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer greatly and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests and the scribes, and be killed, and rise again after 3 days. He spoke this openly. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. At this he turned around and looked at his disciples, rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan. You are thinking not as God does, but as human beings do." He summoned the crowd and his disciples and said to them, "Whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and that of the gospel will save it." When I first entered my religious community, the leader of our community told my classmates and me that we did not need to take on sacrifices to please God. All we needed to do was to take life as it came and to live it in as constructive a manner as possible. Filled with the vigor of youth, I thought to myself that he was a weak man who did not want to take on any sacrifices. I was aware that my religion said to take on the cross of Christ. Today, as I look at my life, I realize that the priest was correct, but he was speaking a language that I did not understand. Now, I do not believe that God asks me to do sacrifice any more than he asked Jesus to take on sacrifice. But I also see that if I am to live in our world and try to bring peace and harmony into our world, then the sufferings will come, just as they came for Jesus the Christ. What was Jesus' point when he tells Peter and his disciples that they too must take up their cross and follow him? An African woman told me that when she was living as a young girl in Africa during her country's civil war, and with a scarcity of food, their mothers would go into the bush to scavenge for food. If they found something, plants or berries, but did not know if they were poisonous, they would take them home and boil them and eat some. The next day, if they had no bad reaction to the food and it had not killed them, they would then boil the remainder and give it to their children. We really do not need to ask why mothers would do such a thing. We know that it was a loving act that was willing to give one's life for that of her children. How is it possible to love someone more than oneself? If we were to say that those African mothers were silly and that they should have protected themselves first, then we would not understand the soul of Jesus the Christ, who willingly sacrificed himself for others. Christ's loving action revealed the very divinity of God, whose compassionate heart reaches out with love to each one of us. If we, like Peter, thought first about ourselves, we would never understand the heart of God that Jesus proclaims. There is a natural instinct to want to preserve one's own life. Society lives by that rule and will do what is necessary to maintain its position. Wars have been fought to preserve our status quo, and the last 20 years of American presence in Afghanistan witnesses to that fact. A relative of mine whose husband, a member of an elite SWAT police force team who had entered the North Tower to help evacuate the people, was one of the heroes who died when the tower collapsed. Some days later, she received a phone call from the president to offer his condolence. She asked the president if he was able to sleep at night. She had heard of the plans that were already underway to find and kill those responsible. He said yes, he was able to sleep. She then said, "Please don't use my husband's death as one of the reasons to go to war." The president was upset by her words and replied in an angry tone. Today, 20 years later, we see the drastic results of an angry nation's response to the 9/11 attack. I realize now that when Jesus was responding to Peter, he was not asking him to take on some penance. He was telling him that to bring the compassion of God into our world, it would need our sacrifice and our commitment. If I am happy and content with my life, with more than enough money to meet my needs, then the question Christ asks me is, what am I doing with the extra money? If I am an American citizen and have no fear of being deported, how do I live my life seeing the worry and security of those who fear expulsion? The world as we have it today lives with lots of fear and anxiety. The powerful of the world are content as long as they are secure, and they have the power to keep things as they are. The Christ Spirit asks a response from us that will bring God's spirit of love and peace to humanity. My brothers and sisters, does the fact that we call ourselves Christians and followers of Christ show us any crosses that we might need to embrace? God bless you all.